2020 has been a pretty tricky year for movies. Luckily, the calendar is already filling up for the next few years, and a whole heap of exciting projects are slated for release. Here are some of the biggest films arriving in 2021 and beyond. After the runaway success of 2018's A Quiet Place, it seemed almost inevitable that a sequel would soon follow. After all, the film ended in a perfect position to set up the next chapter of the story, and there was no small amount of fan demand for another installment either. By 2019, writer-director John Krasinski was back on board to make the sequel, and A Quiet Place Part 2 was on track to arrive in theaters in the spring of 2020. The second chapter of the saga will follow the surviving members of the Abbott family as they attempt to venture out beyond their farm. Meanwhile, it looks like the story will flash back to reveal what happened the day the world started to fall apart, showing how Krasinski's character Lee first led his family in the early days of the crisis. A Quiet Place Part 2 was originally set to hit theaters on March of 2020, but the COVID-19 pandemic forced a change in scheduling. The sequel was initially pushed to September of the same year, but when it became clear that this wasn't all that feasible either, it was then moved to its current release date, April 23, 2021. The ninth film in the Fast and Furious series was supposed to have been released in May 2020, but growing concerns over the spread of the coronavirus in March led Universal Pictures to move the film's release date back nearly a year. Now, fans will have to wait until April 2, 2021 to see Dominic Toretto and his crew face off against a dangerous new Toretto brother, this time played by John Cena. The news came after F9 had already had the promotional red carpet rolled out in the form of a heavily teased first trailer, which also revealed the long-awaited return of Han to the Furious fold. The real question now is what this means for the planned 10th installment in the Furious franchise. Fast 10 originally held the April 2021 date, now held by its predecessor. Obviously, the coronavirus has put a squeeze on film production around the world, so fans probably shouldn't expect two films in this franchise to drop in the same year. That said, never count Dom and his family out. Fast 10 might arrive sooner than you think. After the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot failed to launch a new film series in its own right, it seemed like the beloved supernatural comedy franchise might never hit the big screen again. But that all changed in 2019 when director Jason Reitman revealed that he'd been quietly working on a new film set within the continuity of the first two movies. Ghostbusters co-creator Dan Aykroyd had worked on a version of a third film for years, but now, with Reitman on board with his own new take, the original series is finally set to continue.
I love this plan. I'm excited to be a part of it. Let's do it. The job is definitely not worth $11,500 a year.
Ghostbusters Afterlife will be set in the present day and follow a family who moved to rural Oklahoma after inheriting some land from the kid's mysterious grandfather, who possibly turns out to be original Ghostbuster Egon Spangler. Ghostbusters Afterlife was originally set to hit theaters in the summer of 2020, but due to the coronavirus pandemic, the film is now set to arrive March 5th, 2021. Venom was one of the biggest comic book movie hits of 2018 and by far the most surprising. The film did so well, in fact, that Sony quickly greenlit a sequel, and soon after motion capture legend Andy Serkis stepped up to direct it. As promised by the first movie's post-credits scene, the second Venom will indeed focus on the madman known as Cletus Cassidy, whose comic book counterpart is famous for becoming the supervillain known as Carnage. Tom Hardy will return as Eddie Brock, and Woody Harrelson will play Cassidy himself. In April 2020, the film was also given a pretty appropriate title, Venom: Let There Be Carnage. Though it was originally scheduled to arrive in the fall of 2020, Venom: Let There Be Carnage was delayed by the coronavirus pandemic and will now hit theaters on June 25, 2021. In the spring of 2022, just over 5 years after his MCU debut, Doctor Strange will finally get his very first sequel movie. Marvel Studios announced at San Diego Comic-Con that director Scott Derrickson and star Benedict Cumberbatch would both return for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which Derrickson promised would be the first truly scary film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In early 2020, however, Derrickson vacated the director's chair due to so-called creative differences with Marvel, and horror legend Sam Raimi was later confirmed as his replacement. Strange won't be the only hero in the flick either. He'll be joined by Wanda Maximoff, who will once again be played by Elizabeth Olsen. Scarlet Witch's appearance in the film will also tie in directly to the events of WandaVision, a Disney Plus series starring Olsen alongside Paul Bettany as the Vision. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness hits theaters on March 25th, 2022. It's been more than 30 years since Top Gun roared into theaters, and the film is still considered one of the best blockbusters of Tom Cruise's career. The story of a Navy fighter pilot who refuses to play by the rules, the film remains a classic piece of 1980s action.
I feel the need for speed.
And now, after years of teasing from Cruise himself, fans are finally getting a sequel. Top Gun: Maverick sees Cruise returning to the title role of Maverick, now a much older man, who's still pushing the envelope as a pilot and refusing promotions that would take him out of the cockpit for good. Though he's happy to continue in his old ways, Maverick's life is upended by a new dangerous Top Gun mission and the arrival of Bradley Bradshaw, the son of his late friend Goose. Promising plenty of aerial action, Top Gun: Maverick also sees the return of Top Gun star Val Kilmer, as well as a number of franchise newcomers, including Jon Hamm, Jennifer Connelly, Ed Harris, and more. Maverick was originally supposed to arrive June 2020 before being delayed to December. The film is now set to land July 2nd, 2021. For some time now, Legendary Pictures' Monsterverse has been working to unite the biggest kaiju in cinema history. What began with Godzilla in 2014 and continued through Kong, Skull Island, and Godzilla King of the Monsters was always leading to a moment when the two most famous giant movie monsters of all time would clash on screen. Now, it's almost here. In the form of Godzilla vs. Kong, the showdown between the radioactive lizard and skyscraper-scaling gorilla. Adam Wingard is in the director's chair this time, working with an ensemble cast that includes a host of returning Monsterverse stars, as well as newcomers Alexander Skarsgård, Rebecca Hall, and Eiza Gonzalez. The film promises to feature the titular battle, of course, but it'll also provide more insights into the origins of the Titans themselves, deepening the mythology around the headline monsters. Godzilla vs. Kong was originally set to arrive in November 2020, but the COVID-19 pandemic led to a reshuffle. The film is now set to hit theaters May 21st, 2021. In August 2019, Spider-Man's future was thrown into serious jeopardy when reports surfaced that Sony Pictures and Disney were unable to reach a new agreement concerning their shared rights to the character. Since 2015, Spider-Man has had one foot in Sony's solo films and one foot in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, thanks to an agreement that allowed the studios to share him. When attempts to renegotiate that agreement fell apart, Spidey's MCU future seemed to fall apart with them. But in late September that year, the dispute between the studios was finally settled. After a tense few weeks for fans, Sony and Disney agreed to a renewed partnership with Spider-Man that will take the character through at least one more solo film and one more appearance in an unnamed future MCU film, setting the stage for the next phase of the character's Marvel adventures. Very little is currently known about what those adventures will look like, but we do at least know that, after a few delays, the still untitled third Spider-Man film will swing into theaters on December 17th, 2021. While Spider-Man has spent the last few years hanging out with the Avengers over the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the film rights to all of the web-slinger's supporting characters remain at Sony Pictures, and they've been hard at work on their own shared universe of Spidey-adjacent heroes and villains. After Venom became a box office hit in 2018, that effort was stepped up, and in the spring of 2021, Morbius will become the second Spidey villain to get his own solo movie. Jared Leto stars as Michael Morbius, the first live-action version of the living vampire from the pages of Marvel Comics. As he searches for a cure for a rare blood disease that could kill him, Morbius accidentally alters his own biological makeup and gives himself a kind of vampirism, which also grants him superhuman abilities. The first trailer for the film leaned heavily into the darker aspects of the Morbius story, but also teased that Michael Keaton will make some kind of appearance as Adrian Toomes, his character from Spider-Man: Homecoming. Though it was originally scheduled for the summer of 2020, Morbius was delayed by the coronavirus pandemic and will now hit theaters on March 19th, 2021. When Mission Impossible 3 arrived with the lowest box office numbers of the series in 2006, it seemed that the action franchise was falling apart. Never count Tom Cruise out, though. The Impossible films found their footing again with Ghost Protocol in 2011, and they've been building steam ever since, with 2018's Fallout ranking as the most financially successful and critically acclaimed installment yet. Naturally, it made sense to continue the series, and after the success of Fallout, it seemed like writer-director Christopher McQuarrie was the man to do it. At first, McQuarrie was reluctant to try and top his last installment, but he eventually agreed to do not one, but 2 films in the series, which are being shot back-to-back. The first of these, Mission Impossible 7, will arrive November 19, 2021, with the 8th film in the franchise landing on November 4, 2022. Tom Cruise will return as Ethan Hunt, and Rebecca Ferguson is also expected to be back as his mysterious ally, Ilsa Faust. Among the many other characters expected to make their return to the franchise is Henry Czerny, who hasn't been seen since the original movie in 1996. Everything else is being kept firmly under wraps, but you can pretty much guarantee that whatever Cruise and McQuarrie have in store is going to be pretty darn spectacular. While the events of Avengers Endgame seem to herald the end of both Iron Man and Captain America in the MCU, one other franchise from the old days still has a few things left to say. Yes, Thor is returning to his solo series once again for a 4th installment, Thor: Love and Thunder. Marvel Studios made the announcement at San Diego Comic-Con 2019, having already confirmed that Thor Ragnarok director Taika Waititi would be back as both writer and director for the next film. Chris Hemsworth will return in the title role alongside Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie, as well as a rather more surprising cast member, Natalie Portman, who walked away from the role of Jane Foster after Thor: The Dark World. And what's more, Jane will get to pick up Mjolnir this time around, signaling an adaptation of the 2010s comic book saga in which Foster became the new Thor. The jam-packed Thor: Love and Thunder arrives February 11th, 2022. It's been 20 years since The Matrix changed cinema forever, with its blockbuster combination of gravity-defying action and existential sci-fi storytelling. The film went on to spawn 2 sequels, but after The Matrix Revolutions, it seemed like Neo's journey had come to a definitive end. That changed in summer of 2019, when Variety reported that Matrix co-creator Lana Wachowski was returning to write and direct a 4th installment of the beloved franchise, and she wouldn't be alone either. Wachowski's return came with the news that original stars Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss would also be back in their respective starring roles as Neo and Trinity. Whoa. A few months later, Warner Brothers announced that the film would arrive May 21, 2021. It later ended up pushed back to April 2022. Very little is known about what exactly will bring Neo and Trinity back to the Matrix after all these years. After all, while there was a certain ambiguity to the ending of The Matrix Revolutions, it did at least seem to resolve the journey of those characters. Wachowski obviously had a new idea, though, and watching one of the franchise's original creators return with a fresh take is too good of an opportunity to pass up. Now that Avengers Endgame has brought the epic Infinity Saga storyline to a close, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as we know it, is about to undergo some major changes. Yes, familiar characters will remain, but they won't be alone for long. A whole heap of new heroes are coming over the horizon, including the MCU's first all-new superhero team since the Guardians of the Galaxy debuted in 2014. Based on the Marvel Comics team of the same name, Eternals will follow a near-immortal race of beings who have secretly lived on Earth for thousands of years. Following some kind of unexpected tragedy in the wake of Endgame, they will be forced out of hiding and back into an ages-long battle against the Deviants, their ancient enemy. The film boasts a star-packed cast, including Angelina Jolie, Salma Hayek, Richard Madden, Kumail Nanjiani, Brian Tyree Henry, Gemma Chan, and more. Not only are MCU fans getting a new team, but they're also getting the most diverse cast of superhero characters in the MCU to date, including their first openly gay superhero and first deaf character. Though it was originally scheduled to arrive in the fall of 2020, the coronavirus pandemic has shifted Marvel's entire release schedule, and Eternals will now land on February 12th, 2021. There have been plenty of Spider-Man movies in the 21st century so far, but none of them ever struck a chord quite like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The film marked the first time Spidey had hit the big screen as the star of an animated film, and the creative team took full advantage of that by crafting a truly remarkable visual style. Spider-Verse also opted for a more diverse approach to its characters by making Ultimate Spider-Man Miles Morales the lead character and surrounding him with alternate universe spider heroes of all kinds.
It can get weirder. I just washed my hands. That's why they're wet. No other reason.
The result was an almost universally beloved instant classic, a film that took home box office gold and then began filling up a trophy case with awards, including the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. Sony Pictures was so high on the Spider-Verse concept that the sequel was in the works even before the film hit theaters, and it turned out that excitement was justified. Now, it's just a matter of time. The sequel to Into the Spider-Verse will chronicle the further adventures of Miles Morales and is set to hit theaters October 7th, 2022. Though he may be the fastest of DC's on-screen superheroes, The Flash has been taking his sweet time getting to the big screen in his own solo movie. Development on a DCEU film starring the Scarlet Speedster has stretched back nearly a decade, with various writers and directors lining up for the project, only to eventually depart. Ezra Miller then debuted as Barry Allen with a brief cameo in Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, before going on to star in Justice League in 2017. Since then, a number of changes have forced Miller's Flash solo film to hop around the calendar. Now, it seems it may have finally found its spot. With IT director Andy Muschietti and Birds of Prey writer Christina Hodson taking the reins, The Flash is now expected to arrive in 2022. Provided it can make it to the finish, the film is a surefire to be a hit. Let's just hope it can actually make it off the starting line. Like The Flash, Jason Momoa's Aquaman first appeared in a brief cameo in Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, before going on to become one of Justice League's biggest scene stealers. For his first solo film, director James Wan and Momoa delivered a massive undersea epic that combined superhero adventure with epic fantasy storytelling and a brighter, more comedic outlook than previous DCEU films. The result was a box office mega hit that grossed more than $1 billion after its release during the 2018 holiday season. With that in mind, a sequel was pretty much inevitable. In February 2019, Warner Bros. Announced that Aquaman 2 was indeed moving forward and would arrive in theaters 4 years after the first film. Momoa is set to return to reprise his role as the titular superhero, and Wan has signed on to produce and possibly direct too. Aquaman 2 splashes down in theaters on December 16th, 2022. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite movies are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.